So, hello and welcome to this talk. Idempotence, or Dempotence as it said on the sign outside, isn't a dirty word. Thank you for joining me. I know the other talks were brilliant. I'm actually really looking forward to watching them later when they come up on video. I hope you've all been having a good time so far. I know I have. It's been really good to see everybody. But let's jump in. What are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. First up, we are here. We're going to cover who I am and why I think I can talk to you about this. We're going to look at what idempotence actually is and why you should care about it. We're going to run through a few demos, and there's going to be, hopefully, almost certainly, some time for questions at the end. Having said that, we're going to break for questions throughout, so if you do have a question, you shouldn't actually need to hold it until the very end. Just stick your hand up, or I'll make a note or ask. So, who am I? I'm James Ruskin. I've been around for a mere decade or so in the industry, and in a tale as old as time, or at least the Linux epoch. I started out working on help desk. I moved into various roles that I'm going to summarize here as sysadmin, and then lucked out and moved into a DevOps engineer role that really helped. The glue that held me together from start to finish there and really drove my growth between all those roles was certainly PowerShell. So I would definitely refer to myself as a PowerShell dev. It seems like a good thing to do. The desire to script away all my boring problems and repetitive work from tickets, write code, and to tools to empower other people, and elaborate CI/CD pipelines to help people build stuff, deploy it, test it, etc. It's all so possible. And it took me to Stack Overflow, a multitude of blogs, and the various wonderful PowerShell communities that are so friendly. I'm now working at Chocolatey Software with some lovely people, trying to help others simplify and automate all sorts of stuff. And we've just had a birthday, so that's nice. Before we get much further, it's worth saying that this is all opinionated, entirely opinionated, and though I think it's good stuff, you are perfectly welcome to disagree. I wrote some pretty fragile scripts when I started out. I wish I'd considered this a bit more. But I didn't really look at the bigger picture when I was really starting. There were certainly a few late nights that I caused myself back then, and certainly more recently as well. And it's, sorry, I've made a note that I have a really odd relationship with the word fun. So if I do overuse it, and possibly badly, just bear with me. So, what is idempotence? Webster's dictionary defines idempotence as, well, it wasn't actually that helpful, so after double-checking my spelling, I went over to Wikipedia and found that idempotence is the property of operations in mathematics, and which we're going to skip, and computer science, whereby they can be applied multiple times without changing the end result beyond the initial application. Or at least it said that at some point this week. So basically, with given inputs, an operation should work and result in something predictable, even if it has been rerun or the state is uncertain. This can be applied to a stunningly wide range of things in IT and DevOps, as you can imagine. So if we're going to cut it down, we're going to say that idempotence is operations that are rerunnable, that have a predictable result, and that's kind of the basis for so much of our DevOps journey these days. So many of the talks that we've seen this week have come across ideas that we need to cover this sort of thing. And it just helps to get that. So anyway, from in-depth configuration management tools to simple install scripts, to build scripts, to a list of things that you want to behave properly is pretty endless. Pretty much any kind of operation you want. You're looking to set things in files, you're looking to update users or create users, VMs environments, deployments, builds, etc. April Edwards' keynote on Monday actually mentioned the joy of time to deploy checklists. As I mentioned earlier, I started out in help desk. And my journey into PowerShell started by essentially trying to automate away checklists, because they're quite boring to do. Though they can sort of be idempotent, they fall down when you have human error and when you have people having to wait between different stages of processes. One of my earliest memories then of PowerShell was trying to automate the onboarding process. It started with basic stuff, create an AD user, make sure they're in the correct groups, ensure they have all the Exchange enablements you could ever want, get a PC, find it, add it to AD, deploy things, an image, trigger updates, install software, hopefully, again, some kind of automation there. So, as you can imagine, that sort of falls over quite often. But over time, I improved my script reliability until I thought they were good enough to give to other people, link up with Jenkins or something like that, allow for other users to use them without the worry that it would go horribly, horribly wrong. And that kind of looks, or at least, if you wanted to, you could see something like this. So to go into, sorry. Is that big enough? Perhaps too big? Okay. I went with high contrast. I thought that would help. Okay. Would we prefer dark? I actually personally have a hard time focusing on dark themes. Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, high contrast experimental light. No, fair enough. So, yeah. So, start out with something along the lines of creating a new employee. You can obviously start out with something really quite naive. Straight up, take a name, take a department, go through, create users. This can fall over really quite easily and quickly if you're not careful. You probably want, sorry, could you just bear with me just 1 second while I just move on? Different screen time. Oh, yes, that is quite right. Right, so, yes. So, yeah, this could fall over quite easily. However, if you add a little handling for errors, for existing users, for the rest of the stages in there, we can see that we can actually start to improve the reliability, improve the ability for this to flip through without falling over. You can check for an existing AD user before you create it. You can start to look to see if their group memberships have been taken care of before you actually start adding the user to those groups, although that's mostly fine, and so on. So just as an initial example. So it's pretty simple to write things in a more idempotent way. There's a bit more focus on error handling, and absolutely related that you're not just initializing objects without looking. You're going to ensure that they are updated to the expected result, if you can. So more error handling and more get-set behavior, if you will. Does that all make sense? Any questions before we continue? Okay. So, why should we care? Why worry? It's not exactly a big deal. Personally, I disagree. If you are writing idempotent code, you can trust that everything's going to happen as you expect. You're going to be able to pass that off to people without it falling over. So it should handle unexpected twists, and it should allow you to share that to other people, which will, is a nice thing. It's even if you start off as a solo guy who's very into PowerShell, you should be able to find that sharing code makes everything better. So, I was told at one point that demos were better than slides, so let's jump into some demos, and I'm going to now awkwardly switch back to the other mode of showing things. So I apologize for that. I tried not to warn people at the start, just because I thought it would draw attention to it, but I've managed it enough. It's fine. Okay, let's just do this. Okay. So, going from the top then, we said one of the things you might want to enjoy doing is to set lines in files, essentially. And obviously, there's a very naive way to do that. You can literally just call something like add content. Of course, here we're using the host file as an example, and the host file does handle multiple lines, but may not give you the expected result if you do that. So a better thing to do here would be to take something like this and use additional logic in order to strip existing things, and then reset it without those, and then add the host file line. This should allow you to be confident that your script is going to run without any kind of particular issue. Which one, sorry? Would it help if I turned on line wrapping? Yeah, sure. Sorry about that. So yeah, it's mildly unfun. Obviously, I'm using regex, so now I've got several problems. We already covered user creation, and we can see, possibly with our new font size, that this is, again, a little naive, and runs more nicely if you start checking if things are there and ensuring that stuff exists and is set to the correct details. Obviously, I've done a hilariously naive method of figuring out my user details here. In terms of build scripts, obviously, if you are running build scripts on a local machine, then you're probably going to have a lot of things installed that you may not have on a clean build agent. In these instances, you can find that prerequisites don't get installed nicely. So if you had, for example, a simple PowerShell module build using Module Builder, then you might think this would work, and it should work. You've got your module being built, you've got your signing arguments being created or found, and then you're signing your stuff. However, if you spin this up on a new build box without the signing cert, you'll find that this errors out horribly, and of course, it probably won't find this module, which isn't available on most fresh boxes. A better approach might be to have an install prerequisite step, where you install your module, and to ensure that you have more handling around the signing arguments, to ensure that you've got your certificate, you've got your files to sign, and then sign things. I'm sorry, I actually completely forgot to apologize. I know, I'm sorry. I did promise to destroy a VM during my presentation. Sadly, I got a bit ahead of myself and actually destroyed my work laptop on Friday. So, tried to recover things. My backup laptop, which I did think to bring, doesn't actually have Hyper-V, so all of my VMs that I was going to bring and display this stuff on in slightly more gory detail don't work. I couldn't get another system up and running in time. So anyway, my apologies for that. In terms of install systems, or installing software and the like for deployments, you can really go down the levels with this. You can see that we've got here a very potentially fragile install method where we literally just say, we've got an installer, we're going to run it. No worries. More sensible, perhaps, would be to test if the installer is actually installed before we try installing it. So going and searching for the uninstall registry keys and then saying, we're going to install it. That at least will give us the a decent chance of coming out of this with it only installing if it needs to. Even better still, we have an example here that shows the same idea where we say, is it installed? If not, we're actually going to go, we're going to run the thing, and we're going to capture the last error code. We're going to wait for it to finish, and then we're going to capture the last error code, exit code, and then we're going to deal with that. In this case, it's fairly simplistic. Obviously, I work for Chocolatey, so what I would tell you to do in most cases is try a Chocolatey install, which is a little bit easier and simpler. But that is, as I said, somewhere I work, so that is just my opinion. If we get into Ansible or other configuration management systems, you can certainly rely on there being some form of doing whatever you want to do. It's actually quite interesting, though. You can go and then look at the various methods they use. It's all PowerShell. You can go and read it. It's on GitHub. I'd recommend it. The Ansible Windows collection is very available, and you can just go and see that. However, that does kind of imply that you can go and see how it's done, and then it's not such a big twist to go and do it yourself. Of course, again, you can find that your methods are less than optimal. If you're creating a user straight away, then you are absolutely at the mercy of your REST API and what response it will give you. If you use something more interesting, again, if you do go to the other talks that are happening right now, such as Josh's talk, Josh King, he's doing a talk on Ansible and how we do this sort of thing. But you can absolutely use more complex methods with getting the current users, storing them in a register, and then creating users that aren't existing. And if that's the case, then it's a little more robust. Any questions on any of that? Okay. Finally, as my final example, which is a little bit terrifying, we have DSC class-based stuff. In this case, again, I had Jenkins installed on a VM, and I can't really show it off. But I've stripped it down, and essentially, again, this is kind of the best case. You have a get method, a set method, and a test method, and you say, if the existing environmental stuff is not matching what I expect, then please go and adjust that. Make sure it is matching what we expect. That should, again, allow it to run consistently without failure. So, more questions? Well, I am definitely winning then because I am going to be the fastest session. So, in summary, idempotent operations behave predictably. I should have. And you should try and ensure that that's going to happen. Writing an idempotent functionality will reassure your users and you that all of your stuff is going to work. It only takes a little more effort and consideration, and I think it's good practice even if I haven't explained it terribly well. Thank you.